Welcome to Backstage with Becca with special guest Drew Redington.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca. On this episode, this Elon University grad has been involved in developing shows like Chasing Rainbows and The Outsiders, and has been seen on Broadway in shows like Holiday Inn, The Prom, Mean Girls, and currently New York, New York, where he is in the ensemble and understudies Jimmy, Tommy, and Alex. Please welcome Drew Redington.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Oh, good. Just having some coffee on this gray, cloudy morning.
That's how it is in LA too. I'm in LA and normally
Okay.
it's like,
Oh my gosh, wait, you're up so early.
I am, but I've been getting up earlier and earlier now, so I'm getting in a habit of doing it, which is good for me, I think.
Okay, that's good. That's good. We like a habit.
Yeah, I think it's better than waking up at 12 p.m., which my dog would love if I did that.
I agree.
Yeah, I can get the day started and stuff.
Mm.
So, crazy that the weather's the same in New York and LA, first of all. Since LA is always sunny and beautiful and stuff, and it's May.
I know.
What's the temperature like there? Just curious, because
we're still it's still spring, so it's the 50s, 60s, nothing too crazy yet, which I'm not mad about. I don't need to go right into summer yet. So
right.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, because I just was with my friend from Wisconsin, and she was like, I'm going back to 37-degree weather.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, huh? In May?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Crazy. So, how have you been? It's been a big year, crazy time for you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's insane right now. I'm good. It's been a crazy past 4 months putting up New York, New York, but we finally opened last week, and it's wonderful. I'm so thrilled that we're open, and I'm so thrilled that us as a company can finally just breathe into the show and live into the show, because it, as so many performers know, as after you open, everything grows so much more. So I'm excited for that next step for all of us to take.
Yes, and I'm gonna get into New York, New York later.
Oh yeah.
But I do want to ask, I feel like opening nights have gotten so big in the past 2 years alone. And I know you've done Broadway shows before, but how are opening nights different nowadays, in your opinion?
I think it depends on what show you're doing, and I think it depends on what you want to make out of your opening night now. Because I know there's so many, it used to be where sometimes a lot of press stuff would happen after the show, and now a lot of shows have started doing it before the curtain goes up, which as a company we found really nice, because we all have guests. We have mom, dad, friends, family, loved ones come to the show, so it was nice that we got to get all that out of the way so we could actually get to celebrate. And for me, an opening night is kind of whatever you want to make out of it. You can spend all night walking around, meeting new people, or there's a lot of times where you can just hang with the people that you brought to celebrate. Because also at the end of the night, it really is a celebration for you and your company to, celebrate this massive thing that you just accomplished. So
all the hard work.
Yeah, it's kind of a pick your own adventure, if you will. But yeah, they're just a wonderful evening, just because I feel as performers, we go through so much putting up a new show, so to finally make it to opening night and then to just have a celebration is wonderful.
And to get the chance to dress up and pick
Yes, of
outfits and
course.
stuff, I feel that's so fun.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. Because, we don't get to do that every day. I remember I walked in and my dresser was like, "Oh, you're in a suit." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you've only seen me in my costume or you've seen me in like rehearsal clothes." Yeah,
Yeah, right. Or like stuff that's comfy, like coming in the
exactly.
theater. Yeah.
Yeah. With my
Yeah.
sweatshirt on, just ready to go. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's what I do every day.
Yep.
So, have you always known that you wanted to be a theater performer? And when was the moment you realized?
I I knew since I was about like 4 or 5 years old that I wanted to perform. I At the time I didn't necessarily know what that meant. I remember my grandma and my aunt took me to see the national tour of Beauty and the Beast, and I was like 4 years old and I loved it. I apparently was like sitting on the edge of my seat the entire time. And I remember that's when I realized that I wanted to try it. I didn't really know that meant like going to school for musical theater. I didn't know that meant like going to Broadway, New York, or having a life as an actor, as a living actor. Like I had no idea what that was really until probably middle school. So like there was, which was actually kind of nice because there was this time from like 10 years ish where I kind of just did it because I loved it. I didn't necessarily do it because I thought there was going to be a career out of it, or I thought that I was going to have a job. I just did it because I loved it. And so when I found out, I was like, oh, I can make a living off of it, and like you can do it and for a living and everything. It was wonderful.
It's a
Yeah.
bonus.
It is, it definitely is an added bonus for sure.
Yeah, it's like as a kid, like if you go see like the national tour of Annie, you don't realize that these kids are like making like paychecks
Oh no.
while on tour. You're just like, oh, that looks fun. I
Yeah.
want to try.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's like inspiring in a whole different way as a kid.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like that looks fun instead of, oh, well, that looks like a good way to make money.
Right. Right.
So, um, how growing up did you become a well-rounded performer? Because you have a lot of dance experience too.
I do. So what's actually funny, when I started performing, I did not dance. I just sang, and I was at the theater growing up. I was very fortunate to have a lot of I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri,
Oh,
which is a very surprisingly well-rounded theater community. So I had a lot of people there to learn from. And I was doing a theater program there, and I was fortunate enough to get in when I was really young. And after about like 2 or 3 years, one of the directors came up to my parents and me, and they were like, "Look, we really love Drew, but if he wants to really keep doing this, we need him to take a dance lesson because he can't dance, like he can't move." And so my parents were like, okay. So next year, put me in a tap and a jazz class. And it's funny because it's now, at least with New York and my career in New York, it's been, that was kind of my ticket in the door, was my dance skills. And on top, then after that, I did the other stuff. And but it is funny that that's one of, I think, my strongest parts of me as a performer is something that I was told. I was like, you need to do this or it's not going to happen.
wow.
Which is funny. So yeah, I think just in terms of growing up, for having a nice, well-rounded thing, as I said, St. Louis was such a diverse place for any type of theater, straight play, musical theater, and anything. And I was very fortunate. I had a lot of teachers growing up, so I learned from a lot of people. which I think is one of the best things to do, is just to get educated in any way, in any shape or form that you can. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's really like inspiring, and I feel ashamed for being like, I can't dance. I could never do that, because it just like goes to show that if you like put your mind to something and work hard at something,
Yeah.
you'll get so far. Because like also we've done Case Nicholas stuff,
Uh-huh.
and the choreography in those shows is no joke
Oh,
either.
no joke at all. If you're in a Casey Nicholas show, you are going to be dancing your butt off.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
and you have like tap numbers in those shows too. So, which
Yeah,
I feel like while a lot of people might view it as like the most fun form of dance, it's also very difficult,
it is. Yeah, for sure.
especially at a fast pace.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%.
Yes. So you went to Elon.
Uh-huh.
Why did you choose Elon University, and what was the most valuable lesson you learned there?
So Elon was very special because growing up, I knew when I went into high school, I knew a bunch of like college programs. Like I knew like what was on my list and everything, and I didn't have a big list going into college auditions. And I remember I went to Elon. I auditioned in the fall because they have you can like audition early.
Ooh,
Um,
you're like, I'm taking full advantage.
I was like, absolutely. I was like, I don't got time for this, and I wanted everything to spread out a little bit. But the other bright side of that was you can find out early if you can find out about early acceptance. So you could audition in like October and find out in November.
Ooh.
So I went to Elon, and immediately there was something when I stepped on campus, I fell in love with the school, the vibe of the students, the community that was there. And on top of the training that I knew that I would get there and the experience I would have there, it was the only school that I auditioned for where I felt I was going to be challenged, which was I didn't really think about until I started auditioning for schools. But I wanted to go to a school where in dancing, singing, acting, etc., I was going to be learning, and I wasn't going to be starting at a place where I thought I was just going to plateau. And I think that was the biggest draw for me for Elon. I was like, I knew that I was going to grow as a performer, and as an artist and as a human being at that school.
Wow. So you didn't just want like comfort, you wanted to keep learning, keep growing.
Yeah.
And it's a bonus that it provided a like nice community.
100%. Yeah.
So you mentioned St. Louis being like a huge theater city, which like they have the Muny, and
Mhm.
they do a bunch of shows every year, very popular. I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of theater fans travel for the Muny shows,
Absolutely.
which I mean, I've never been, but it's on my bucket list to go because
It's a very cool experience. It's a very, very cool experience for sure.
like,
Yeah, I mean, I grew up doing it, so but there is something about like seeing like a classic show, like a classic like Rodgers and Hammerstein show, like outside under the stars. It's a very, very cool experience.
yeah, it just seems like very large scale, and it's
Yes.
and I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, the team that puts all these shows together, good for them.
They're rock stars. Rock stars.
Because I imagine it's very hard to create a set for all that and to fill the stage,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the stage is big.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite regional show that you've been in, and what do you think makes regional theater so special?
I would say my favorite that I actually my favorite regional show I did was actually recently. I just did model in Fiddler on the Roof at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. And it was actually a production that originally started in Germany, and the opera company asked the director from Germany to come set his production in Chicago. And I showed up and we did our first table read with the entire company. And I have rarely in my career sat down at a first rehearsal and experienced the same joy and excitement from every company member to do a show. And that was thrilling, and everyone was amazing, and the show was beautiful. And the role was a dream role of mine. So getting to do that was a dream come true. And I think what makes it's interesting, regional theater is kind of, it's this niche where you can kind of take risks as an actor, because I've been very fortunate where, like, I've gotten to work in New York, I've gotten to work in other places, I've gotten to do, like, I've been very fortunate to experience different settings.
And everywhere, which is amazing.
And there is something about going to do regional production. Yes, like you meet people that way and everything, but as an actor, you kind of get to experiment a little bit with people who are going to understand the world, because you have like the local company and like out of town company, but you also have an audience where sometimes you could be in Chicago and it's a big theater scene, or I've also done regional work in Texas where a lot of people don't really understand theater all the time, so you can kind of play around sometimes as an artist with things you want to try and things you want to do, and you can learn from that. And I think that's something you don't get as an actor a lot, and I think that's something really special about going to do a regional show, for sure.
Yes, I'm actually from Texas, so
Oh,
like,
really?
thank you for saying that, because I feel like I'm crazy when I'm like, people in Texas, I'm from Dallas, and I'm like, people from
Okay.
Texas just like don't understand theater like people in other parts of the country. Like even out in California, there's an appreciation for theater that there
Yeah.
isn't in Texas.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Yeah, it's always like there's always the theater and there's always a community somewhere, but there is always like a disconnect sometimes, depending on where you are.
Yeah, it's a little underappreciated, but it's getting there. It's growing.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people behind the scenes are like trying hard to like get people to connect with the shows that they come to see. So through regional theater, I've noticed that you do like a lot of like workshops and readings and stuff, and you've done you have like interesting shows on your resume like that haven't yet made it to Broadway, but or like I feel still in the works, like Chasing Rainbows, and I saw The Outsiders,
Yes.
which also I'm very interested in because I loved that book and movie as a child. So through regional theater, and I mean, obviously through working on Broadway, like how do you meet people that like give you these opportunities to go do workshops and labs?
So this is workshops and labs are interesting because they kind of, you get them 8 million ways. I've gotten offers from workshops and labs from just going to an audition like anything else. Like I'll get an appointment and I'll go in and I'll do a full audition, and I've gotten a lab that way. I have gotten workshops from just like getting a text message from like a director or choreographer that I've worked with before regionally, which is nice because like I build a relationship with them, and then like we all get back to the city, and 2 weeks later, like, oh, I need someone for 2 weeks. Are you free? Would you be interested in doing that? And that's kind of another thing about regional theater. For me, at least, that's how I've built so many of my connections with friends and coworkers and peers, is through regional work. So that's kind of how I've built that bridge. But everyone has a different journey with that. I know people who have rarely worked regionally and do a bunch of labs and workshops, and there are people who I know do just regional work and make their living doing regional work, and will also do labs and workshops. So it's a whole it's more about building the connections with the people that you work with and putting your work forward and making sure that you're making the most out of your work experience with your peers and your creative team and stuff like that.
I feel like what an honor to be involved in like these pieces that are so growing.
Yeah, it's
are,
really
like,
cool.
developing.
Yeah, it's very cool to be a part of a new work, because things will change every day, and you can and it's fun to watch something evolve and shape from the performers that you have or the team that you have. Yeah.
And speaking of which, I believe you were in the Prom pre-Broadway. So
I did. Yeah, I did. They did an out of town in Atlanta. And wait, I think Atlanta.
yeah, I think so.
And then after that, they did another workshop in New York, which is when I joined the company. And then we went to the Broadway company. Yeah.
Wow. So did you get to like watch the show change from that workshop to Broadway? I know it probably changed from Atlanta to the workshop.
I did it. So when I auditioned for Prom, there was an illegal bootleg. Don't film shows. But broadcast to everyone listening, don't film our shows. However, there was a bootleg from the Atlanta production. I remember I watched it, which was great. And then we did the workshop, and it was pretty similar. Some like tiny changes, nothing too drastic. But then from the time of the workshop to Broadway, we changed so many things. And it was cool to see it all evolve, because also like as a director, as a choreographer, as a writer, as a composer, as all that, you watch different people do your work, and you watch different audiences watch your work. And when you have that amount of time, it's kind of like doing like an extended like science project. You learn what works, what doesn't work, and it's very nice that you get all of that time.
Especially during previews.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, it was really cool with Prom to watch everything change. And it was also very fortunate. We had a company that wanted to do nothing else but just play around. So it changed all the time, which was wonderful. And we just got like a different experience every day. Even when we opened the show, we knew what the show was going to be, but because we had such a wonderful company that was down to like just try different things, it just stayed like the show. I feel like could have kept going and kept growing and everything.
It should have kept going. I got to see it on Broadway in 2019. My mouth, I was in like the third row, and I was just like watching the choreography the entire time, because I was like, how did they move that fast? What is happening? I was thoroughly entertained the entire time.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
So how did I notice Holiday Inn on your resume too before that? So how
Mhm.
did Holiday Inn prepare you to take on something like the Prom on Broadway?
Um, Holiday Inn was my first Broadway show,
Broadway
and
debut.
it was my debut, and I moved to the city for that show, and I was actually funny was I was the youngest person in the cast by a significant by a significant amount. Like a lot of people were like in their late 20s, early 30s in the show, and I was just like this 19-year-old like coming in like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I was very fortunate that a few of the performers who had been doing shows for years kind of like took me under their wing and kind of taught me like, okay, this is how the business works. Like, this is what you want to do. This is when you want to have, so you can make sure you can take care of yourself, so you can actually like make a living and actually do the thing. And that things I've learned from that have carried me through every show that I've done. So other than like obviously like doing 8 shows a week, being used to that schedule, being used to like a Broadway schedule, it really taught me how to be a performer. And the nice thing about Holiday Inn, there were so many great role models in that show that I was fortunate, like I got to learn from like the best of like how to carry myself through the rest of my career and the business and everything.
Did you get any advice from any cast member in that show that you will like always remember for the rest of your career?
Ooh. Hmm. Oh my gosh, it was so long ago. Let's see. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
You're like, it feels like ages ago.
It really does. And it's funny, it wasn't that long ago, but it feels like ages ago.
But like, I feel like 2020 added like 4 years.
Correct. It's like the never-ending void of time that no one
Yeah,
understands what happened. Yeah.
yeah. It felt like 4 years and it wasn't, but
Yeah.
it did.
Uh,
So I have to, before I get into New York, which
yeah.
which of course getting into soon, I have to ask about Mean Girls, because speaking of dance, you were in Mean Girls where you were in ensemble and understudied Damien
Yes.
and the dad. But
Yeah,
for Damien has a huge tap number at
he
the
does.
beginning of Act 2. So, I mean, how did your experience in dance when you were learning dance back when you were younger help you learn that choreography? Because I can't imagine like taking that choreography and like being like, okay, this is how I'm gonna learn it. I would be so stressed out.
It was it was crazy. So the nice thing was tap is one of my go-tos. Like that's what I really, really liked doing when I was younger. So learning Damien's tap number, I felt very comfortable. And my stage manager and my dance captains were so supportive and so wonderful. Um, so the nice thing was that, and by the time I started learning Damien, I was already with the company for like 2 or 3 months. So I got to watch it and everything. So I knew what I was going to happen. So it was actually nice because I learned all the steps, and then I just kind of got to play around and make it my own, which also they're so open to. So it really became this, here's like the skeleton of what needs to happen. And now let's find out what you, Drew, as a performer want to do with that. So it became just like a nice little like moment for me to do what I wanted to do. And it was so chill and so wonderful and very supportive. Yeah.
And I feel like the audience, the Mean Girls audience, like their energy is next level.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I will never experience another audience like the Mean Girls audience. It's insane.
Yeah, the fan base is there
It's
for
absolutely
the
there.
cast.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So that energy probably helps you as a performer, like enjoy that time on stage even more.
For sure. Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
it about Casey Nicholas shows that you love? Because Casey Nicholas shows.
That's a good question. I will say after working with him and seeing his shows and doing his shows, you always know that you're going to have a good time. And I think that's something that's actually, I think a very, very hard reputation to get, that every time you see a show of his, it is going to be fun. Because sometimes, I've seen so many directors and choreographers that I love, but I never know what I'm going to see. And with Casey, I always know that I'm going to enjoy my evening or my afternoon, if you're going to matinee, of what's going to happen on stage.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, total like that. And as an audience member, going in that you're just gonna like laugh and enjoy yourself and just like be amazed by the choreography and the like everything about the show, the sets.
Wow. Yes.
So currently you're in New York. What was your audition process like for that show? Because I feel like the casting directors saw you when you walked in the room and were like, okay, we can depend on this guy.
Oh my goodness. My audition process was crazy for New York. I was working in Chicago at the time. And I got an appointment from my agent, as so many do, to send in a tape for the ensemble and to cover Jimmy and Tommy. So I put together a tape doing like 3 sides, 2 songs, and they're like, send it off and just send it off. So I like filmed it in like a living room, sent it off, and then about 2 weeks later, I get an email. They're saying, hey, we want you to come back. We're gonna have you dance, and possibly after we dance you, we might have you come back and sing. And so I was like, okay. So I bought a plane ticket, flew up to New York on my day off, went to my dance call, and we did a jazz combination and we did a tap combination. Then they're like, great. I left. About 20 minutes later, got a call from my agent. They're like, hey, they want you to come back, sing and read again for Tommy and Jimmy. We know that they know that you have to leave tomorrow. Can you come back at like 9 p.m.? And I was like, sure.
Oh my gosh.
So went back that night at 9 p.m. Did the Jimmy sides, did the Tommy sides, and sang their songs. Did that, flew back to Chicago. 2 days later, I get a text message from my agent being like, oh, they also want you to put the Alex material on tape by tomorrow morning. I was like, okay, cool. So then that night I filmed another 2 sides and a song, sent that in. And then I want to say 2 weeks later. Yeah. And then like 2 weeks later, I got the official offer from my agent. They're like, oh, they would like you to be a part of the show. And yeah.
So basically by the time you were done auditioning, you knew the entire script from
basically that was the joke. I remember I showed up the first day and they my agent and I, we were laughing because I think I learned at least like 10 different sides for that show. Which was a lot, but it was great. Yeah.
I mean, what goes through your mind when like a casting director sees something in you and is like, "Well, we want you to cover 3 roles as well as be in the ensemble."
It a lot goes through your head because like when you're auditioning, at least with my mindset, I get very focused, and a lot of my timelines were like less than a day turnaround. So I was like, it was nice because I didn't have time to like worry or get anxiety about it. I just like had to do it and put it out. Um, and there is something, it's exciting, especially when knew at a certain point, I knew that the team was interested. I didn't know if I was going to get cast in the show, but it was nice to like know that they were interested. And because at least with New York, I knew the show was new. So I knew that they were like still exploring things. So I knew that I could expand the box a little bit more. And it's always nice because, I have so many friends now that are casting directors, and I have casting directors that know me really well now. And I go in and sometimes it's great and I can continue on with it and I end up getting cast. And sometimes I've gone in for casting directors where I'm in the room and both of us and they know me and I know them, and I'll do the material and both of us will be like, I don't think this is going to be it. And you move on and it's okay. So whenever you make it that far along in a process, it gets really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time I feel like casting directors know like who's gonna be who are like the puzzle pieces
Mm-hmm.
are gonna fit together when they cast certain
Right.
people.
And they have such a hard job because they have 8 million things going through their head, because they have like, okay, well, if this person's doing this, well, then this person can do this, and then they switch it, and then one person not available, so they have to. I think they have one of the hardest jobs in
Oh
the
my
industry.
gosh.
They really,
Yeah.
really
It's
do.
like moving around a little like chessboard on the side.
Yeah.
So how do you go about learning in the rehearsal process, the blocking and the lines and everything for basically 4 tracks?
It it's everyone's different and there's different ways to do it. I was fortunate enough I'm someone who I love diving right into everything. So we would be like blocking numbers, and I would have a little journal and I would be writing down everyone's stuff along with learning my stuff. And then or when principals like would be blocking like their numbers or like their scenes, like understudies, we would be allowed to stay and watch, so like we can learn everything and like everything. And then it was nice because I want to say about a month and a half into the process, we started doing understudy rehearsal. So then we got time to get up and do everything. And I'm someone like I learn by doing. So like I get up, I do it at home. I'll like get up and do it. I'll write all of my notes down. And everyone's different. Some people do it at rehearsal. Some people just do it at home. And everyone has their own process. But especially with this show, it's kind of knocking it out one day at a time. Or like I know now that we're running, I'll like go over lines in my head with the show. Like as I'm changing costumes, I'll be like mouthing things, just like stay on top of everything. But yeah, it's always different for everyone. But I learn by doing, so I just try to do as much as I can.
It's interesting because I bet before you know it, you like know all the lines in the show and you're like, wait, how'd I do that?
Right. Well, exactly. So, because it's like, I've done shows where it's like, we've all done shows where we know the lines and we know what's going to be said. So that's kind of nice, because I will go over something like, oh wait, I know more of that than I thought they did, just from being in the show, which is nice. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you learn by doing thing basically, and you learn from being there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like the same, like if an audience member goes to see a show multiple times, then I think they know like every
Certain
line
things.
in the show. Yeah, everything that's gonna happen, and like knows when an understudy does something unique.
Right.
So speaking of which, how do you go about making each character you understudy your own in that show? So you understudy Jimmy, Tommy, and Alex.
So it's interesting because they Colton, Clyde, and Oliver have created wonderful characters, and watching that, I've been fortunate enough to watch them create the role, so I'm kind of inspired by like what they went through, and I already know that like just me doing the role, I already know it's going to be different, so like I don't really think how I'm gonna like make it different or make it my own. I know that when I do it just being a different person, I know it's going to be different. So I really just try to focus on what they were inspired by with creating their characters, and notes that they got from our director and choreographer and from our book writer, and taking that into account with and how like that resonates with me, and that's kind of where that's the most that I'll allow myself to be different, because I think as like no human experiences everything the same way, so I know already that I'm going to interpret the text differently, I'm going to interpret certain notes differently, so I don't really pay attention that often to how is this going to be different? Can I make it different? Because I already know it is, and I trust the people that have created these roles. So I try to honor what their process has been, and I allow myself to go through that same process. Yeah.
It makes complete and total sense. And like when you get up on stage and play each of these characters, it is gonna be different than the way someone else plays the character, and that's what makes live theater, I think, so fun.
Yeah, for sure.
To watch different people play different roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what is your favorite song / scene from New York, New York, and why? You're like all of it.
All of it. I think this is, oh my God, this might be an unpopular opinion in my cast. I don't know. So there's a scene where Jimmy takes Francine to a place called the Whispering Arch. It's a famous place in Grand Central Station, where like apparently like if you stand on one side of the wall and someone stands on this side of the wall, like you can whisper into the wall and the sound like will travel over like the arch, and like you can hear people whisper. And so Jimmy has a scene where he takes Francine there, and he kind of for the first time expresses like his love for her and like his true feelings for her. And the whole time he's just whispering into us, so like he's not actually talking to her. And I think it's such a the number isn't flashy, the number isn't like a big spectacle number, it's just so sweet and so genuine. And I think the song that they wrote for it is wonderful. It's one of my really, really favorite moments of the show.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so like you just watch it and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so pure and sweet."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like simplicity is always simplicity
Oh, he
is
wins.
always nice and
Yeah,
underappreciated.
yeah.
So, how would you convince people to come see New York on
Um,
Broadway?
I mean, it is the the big Broadway show that we have not had in forever. Like the sets, the costumes, the lighting, the orchestra, the performances, the it is the definition of what musical theater is. And it's a love letter to New York City. It's a love letter to performers. It's a love letter to anyone who has moved anywhere else and has wanted to become something. It's I also think it is one of the most diverse casts ever to be on a Broadway stage, which is super important. It is it's a visual feast for the eyes. It is just a big grand Broadway musical.
It has everything you think of when you
It has
think of
everything you
Broadway.
think of when you think of Broadway.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I mean, it's on my list for next time I'm in New York, but
Mhm,
which is next month.
mhm.
But I feel like if you're going to New York to see Broadway shows and it's not on your list, then like, why are you going to New York?
Also, like, if you're coming to New York, you need to see New York, New York. You have to
Right.
know what we're all about.
Yeah, it's
Um,
literally in the title, New York. The
yeah, it's
place.
like it's what New York is. It's what anyone who is visiting New York, it's New York, New York, the musical is a part of the New York experience.
Yes.
It's it is on the must do along with the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, New York, New York at the St. James. It's on the list.
Yes. Exactly. I mean,
Mhm.
and yeah, New York, New York. Go see it if you're in New York.
Yeah.
So, how do you work on self-confidence in the theater industry?
Ooh. I think it changes. I think for me personally, um, the confidence comes from, you know, looking back on my career and seeing everything. And I'm very fortunate. I have a great team that I work with who have seen me grow since I was 19. And I've been with them since then. It it's a hard, especially after 2020, and we didn't get to do what we do. It's a very hard um career to be in because so much of theater is subjective. And so many times that a lot of people don't realize is like when we make it down to like finals for a job, it's like, oh, well, this person's taller, this person has a hair color, this person fits a costume. There's so much that factors in that it's not about you. So you really have to celebrate the tiny victories that you get, which when like you start out, I feel like so many people move to say like, I have to book a job, I have to book a job, I have to book a job, instead of being like, hey, do you know what? I got a call back, or hey, I made it through the dance call, or hey, they asked for if I'm available because they trust me and they know that I'm interested, or um, so I think there, and I say this to everyone there, and just as actors period, there is so much more success for an actor besides just Broadway. So finding other successes that aren't just that is very important. Otherwise, I feel like people can drive themselves a little bit crazy.
Yes, finding like little small side projects and stuff.
Small side projects, or like other things you want to do with your life or your hobbies, or and what else you want to do as a human that you can celebrate as well. Because I just think that the show business is so cutthroat, for lack of a better term, that you really have to know how to celebrate yourself and what you bring to the table and what you have.
Yeah. I feel like that's like great advice for people who are like in college getting ready to go out into the world of like and make a profession out of this, and like go and audition for a bunch of Broadway shows or national tours and stuff.
Yeah.
So who inspires you in the theater world, to kind of wrap up?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. Currently I would say Colton Ryan, who's in New York with me. He's been wonderful to watch. I love learning by watching. I think, which I'm pretty sure I've already said. I just seeing people work is really, really fun for me. Who else? My friend Beth Lovell, who I worked with in Prom, and I've done a few other shows with her. Watching her work has been wonderful. Watching, actually, also, oh my gosh, this so totally popped into my head. I love watching my other ensemble members, because there was one girl in our ensemble and she did something on stage the other day, and I was like, that is so smart. And I didn't even think about doing that, but just seeing other performers do what they do is really inspiring. I know that's not very specific as like who, but
it totally is. It's like the creativity and people around you.
Yeah.
It's totally, it's very specific.
It also just opens up, it also just reminds me that it's like nothing's set, like no one is going to have the same experience, and just because you have a different experience or a different take on something does not mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that it's not right. It just makes your version or your take special and independent.
Yes, absolutely. So where can people follow you on social media to keep up with what you're doing, and to find like dates that you're on as each of the characters you understudy?
I am so bad at social media, but you can follow me at drew.redington on Instagram. That is the only social platform that I have. I do not post often. Probably there I'll like announce dates and stuff, and that's probably where.
Amazing.
Yeah.
A link in the description to your Instagram too, so
thank you.
find you.
Yeah.
And do you have anything you'd want to promote? Do you have any dates that you can announce for characters you understudy, or if you're
I do not have dates right now. But yeah, no self-promotion. I got nothing.
Just come see New York.
No, just come see New York on Broadway.
Yeah.
At the theater. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll put also the link for tickets for the show below.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my series and talking to me.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
It was so fun, and I loved hearing what you had to say about your career. And New York is definitely on my list next month.
Thank you.
To New York.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!